Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibiers? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Hope you guys are having a good day. We are going to jump in and revisit some of these emails that Donna sent to Wendy during the relocation fight with Dan Markel. Came across those today when I started researching an episode for an entirely different reason, and then remembered these emails exist, and I think they're going to come in at her trial. Before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and click that little bell icon if you want updates of when I post new content. Music fact of the day: during World War II, there was a shortage of shellac, which is a material used to produce records. This led to the rationing of records and also a push towards radio and live performances as a means of musical consumption. My plan leading up to Donna's trial is to go back and watch testimony from all three of the trials that have happened. So we had the joint trial with Katie and Sigfredo. We had that retrial of Katie Magbanois, and then Charlie's trial. And I'm comparing testimony to see what changed between each trial, just point out any differences. Also, it's just a good refresher to get us ready for Donna's trial, which starts just a little over 2 weeks from now. It's coming right up. It's going to be a multi-episode series. I have some listeners who are very new to the case, and if you are, go back and watch the backstory. I have several episodes that tell in detail what happened leading up to and after the murders. At the beginning of Katie's retrial in May of 2022, the state asked Wendy about having immunity and if that means she could never be prosecuted in this case. And Wendy says, that's right. But Prosecutor Kappelman says, that's what you think it means? Wendy says, that's what I think it means. And the state says is derivative use of immunity. Wendy says, nothing she says while she's giving testimony in these trials can be used against her. The state reminds her she can be prosecuted, but nothing you say here can be used against you. And Wendy says, I suppose so. That was pretty much the same dialogue at Charlie's trial. But going back to that very first trial in 2019, the joint trial, she said in 2014, she was employed at FSU Law School. She talks about getting married to Dan. She said they met in 2004 online. She was starting her second year, her 2L year of law school. They first met in person in Washington, D.C., where Dan was working, and Wendy was there looking into a summer job. They were married February of 2006. They moved to Tallahassee in August of 2005 and stayed for that academic year until 2006. From there, they spent a year in Miami from 2006 to 2007, and then went back to Tallahassee from 2007 up until Dan was shot and killed in 2014. The first move was because Dan got a job at FSU. He tried to get a job at the University of Miami, but Wendy said he didn't get the job, so they went back to Tallahassee. They moved to Trescott Drive probably in 2008 or 2009. She said before their oldest son was born. By the way, this is the residence Dan was killed at. She stopped living there in 2012 after the separation. Now, at Katie's retrial, she's asked when they moved to Tallahassee. And the second time, were you living with Dr. Markel the entire time? And Wendy says, I'm sorry, Dr. Markel? Prosecutor Kappelman corrects herself and says, Mr. Markel, Dan Markel, your husband. She said she currently lives in Miami. And when asked who else lives in Miami, she says Donna and Harvey do, as well as Charlie, who was in Broward County. At Charlie's trial, she said she is a part-time attorney and does fundraising for a nonprofit. At each trial, she goes through the ages the kids were at that current time. When Dan was killed, the kids were 3 and 4. When Katie and Sigfredo were tried together, they were 10 and 8. And then at Charlie's trial, the boys were 13 and 14. They talk about the dental practice, and she said Donna doesn't work very much, but she does help with the office some. At Charlie's trial, Wendy said her parents were retired at that point, and she said Donna was the one who wrote the checks at the practice when she was working there and also did all the bookkeeping. In the first trial, In 2019, Wendy was asked, "Is your family wealthy?" And Wendy says, "Are you asking me to speculate? It depends on how you define wealthy. They're not millionaires." But at Charlie's trial, were your parents wealthy at the time Dan was murdered? She said her parents worked their whole life to support them. She thinks the business did well for a period of time. And prosecutor Kappelman says about 2 million in profit each year between 2013 and 2016. Wendy says they never talked to her about money, so she doesn't know how much the business made at any given point. She and Dan separated in September of 2012, and that was Wendy's decision. She said some of the issues in their marriage was how to raise the children in the Jewish faith. At Katie's retrial, she said that that was part of it, but wasn't a central decision in deciding to leave Dan. At Charlie's trial, she said it was a small part. When they first met and started dating, Dan was not as observant and religious as he became over time. Their differences were dietary choices, attendance at synagogue. He wanted to raise the boys more strictly in the faith than Wendy did. At Charlie's trial, she's asked if she moved out while Dan was on a business trip to New York, and he had no clue, and she said yes. She filed for divorce on September 10th, 2012. After the initial separation, she said she didn't want to move to Miami with the kids, and initially it wasn't her desire to move back to South Florida. When asked about a court order to return to Tallahassee from South Florida with the boys, Wendy denies knowing about that court order. She left the marital home and got her own place in Tallahassee. While living at that address, she decided she might want to move to Miami. She said her parents were supportive of her moving, and compared to other people's marriages, she doesn't know if she would consider Donna and Harvey overly involved in her marriage. Now, at Charlie's trial, she's asked if she talked to her mom about the marital problems and the resulting legal issues. She said yes for the marital problems, but for the legal issues, she said she definitely let Donna know the results of that denial to move the children to Miami by the judge, but not the ins and outs of every part of their divorce. This is when my mind jumped back to those emails. We're going to revisit those today before we jump tomorrow into testimony in depth between the three trials. May 3rd, 2013, Donna says Dan's 23-page rant was obviously insufficient, pushed the court to deny your petition. She said, "I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if to prevent any action, your attorney must respond or not." She said Dan has made this divorce a full-time job and said that Dan is quoting 13 cases to show the court why they should toss the petition to relocate. Donna asked Wendy if her attorney is responding to this. The most important part of your divorce is relocation. That word relocation was in bold. She says, "I hope your attorney knows this is your non-negotiable." Lots of things are negotiable. You can't let your attorney think, okay, well, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. She needs to hear from you how serious you are about this and how it will benefit the children with a close-knit family support system, as well as a significantly better paying job with more flexible hours. She tells Wendy her current job requires teaching hours, office hours, court appearances, meetings with med school people, and multiple trips away from home. Those trips need to be coordinated with a very angry man who will not cooperate with you. Donna says, for example, this past weekend, you had your annual conference at the same time his regular NYU crap was taking place. He didn't say, "I go to NYU every month and this is your annual meeting. I'll stay with the kids." Of course not. Danny thinks he's a very important person and he and his needs come first. So, without your parents as backup, one of you would have had to have stayed home with the children. Your attorney needs to understand your mother worked full time in the dental practice until September when she felt she was needed by you for the well being of the children to get them through a transitional time with people who love them, see them frequently, and with whom they share great affection. She mentions Harvey moving patients around so that he can spend significant time with the children as well. With her and Harvey decreasing their hours to help with the kids, it's caused their profit to go down. Donna also tells Wendy to tell the attorney about the loss of income affecting her brother, Charlie, who bought the practice from his father back in July of 2012, and he makes monthly payments to his dad for that. It isn't fair for him to have a decrease in income because his parents are spending so much time in Tallahassee. At this point, Donna kind of starts speaking as if she's Wendy. And to me, that just shows that she is telling Wendy what to say to her attorney to convey in court. Donna writes, "My brother is unmarried and is a wonderful uncle to his nephews. If I'm able to relocate to South Florida, the boys will have an incredibly warm and loving family as part of their lives, not an occasional 2-day weekend trip visit." Donna goes on to say that a hot temper and verbal abuse is what you need to emphasize you suffered under his reign. Narcissistic personality disorder causes major problems in marriages, especially when one believes that because he attended Harvard undergrad and Harvard Law, he's clearly better and smarter than everyone else, including you. You must emphasize that the only reason you left when you did is because of the threat you'll leave without your children, without a penny, and just the clothes on your back. It's important for the judge to know that this guy is a big bully. Donna encourages Wendy to count the number of days Dan's been away on business and add on his 2-week trip to Israel when she was pregnant. Donna says Dan complained he didn't know where Wendy moved for the first 6 weeks. And Donna says to let the court know he wasn't particularly interested in the children prior to the divorce. Donna says he talks trash about you to faculty at FSU, and your pay is only half of his. So, on your own, it's not feasible for you to keep living there where you're living. You've borrowed a considerable amount of money from your parents for furniture, legal fees, moving expenses, and you must repay it. Your parents have paid all grocery bills up to this point, and you have to reimburse them. According to Dan, the relocation must show the current arrangement for the children, and the relocation would advance their interests. This is something we have reviewed numerous times in other papers, Wendy. So this is something we have reviewed numerous times in other papers, Wendy. It's not like she just told her mom, "Hey, I can't move," and that was the end of it. Donna was all up in this drama. She goes on to say, "Review all we've put together in that regard rather than have me repeat it." Donna ends this email with saying another bribe to get him to allow relocation should be the offer of plane tickets, since he does have family that would allow him to use their home to stay in. But that's a last-ditch effort if all else fails. She asked Wendy if she needs information on grocery bills to show the court, just for that, with no support from Dan. Donna says she has those receipts, and she says she's just too angry to write anymore. The next email to Wendy, June 25th, 2013, Donna says it's time for action. Time to take control of your life and not let Dan think he's just won anything by having you remain in Tallahassee. So at this point, that motion's been denied. Wendy and Donna know Wendy's not going anywhere with those boys. Donna says 8 hours away from the only family you have. Let's show that effer what will make him absolutely miserable. You know his weaknesses: religion, money, and control. The rest of your life, and consequently mine, Dad's, and yes, even Charlie's, will be affected how well you can perform and act before July 31st. You need to put on the performance of your life, and you could be a good actress when you want to. I've seen it in action. Dan hasn't beaten the Adelsons yet. If you can put these actions before everything else this month, we believe Dan will be saying, "Stop this," and you'll be telling him, "You wanted me in Tallahassee. My children are going to fit into this Bible Belt." Donna goes on to speak as if she's Wendy, saying she'll put the kids in Sunday school and get them privately tutored by a teenage Catholic kid to teach the boys about Jesus. So they'll be ready for Sunday school in the fall. Donna goes on to tell Wendy she should dress the boys up and take a photo of the boys standing in front of a church in Tallahassee and change her Facebook profile photo to that. And perhaps a caption, "New beginnings in Tallahassee," might be nice. Tell Dan the boys will be baptized in the Catholic faith and he's invited. As long as you're in Tallahassee, the boys will be involved with you in church activities and ceremonies. Now, Donna says she's already checked this out and baptisms can be arranged within 2 weeks. She said we could send evites to Dan, his parents, his sister, and anyone else you want to invite. Donna says she's also looking into summer camp and she'll pay for it. And you cannot tell anyone this is an act. Somehow it'll get back to Dan. She puts in all caps, take control from him, get to him psychologically. He's going to want you to stop this. She says you have one final opportunity to make him angry. We want him ticked off so he realizes he could lose control over his kids. We plan to make a financial offer to him to allow relocation. Maybe he'd allow you to relocate if he knew his kids would be going to Hebrew school in Boca, or maybe he'd like them to invite him to a Christmas party at their other Sunday school. Donna says if Dan keeps this up, the boys will not want to eat in Wendy's non-kosher home, and as the boys get older, they'll be able to choose where they live. Don't allow Dan to have this power and control over them. She ends this one with, "Me and Dad have changed our lives this year to support and assist you and the boys in every way possible. Charlie has accepted the loss of business income for us to do this because he loves you and wants only the best possible future for you. It's time for you to show us you can put on the performance of your life in the next 2 weeks. We send this letter with our love and only the best intentions." At Charlie's trial, she goes through the custody arrangement that they had after the separation. She said that before there was an order in place, they worked it out. In fact, that first weekend after the separation, Dan's parents were in town, so she made sure he had the kids that weekend. Wendy says she knows Dan was upset about the Skyping issue, and the state reminds her that Dan said there was a lack of communication on Skype. Wendy kind of laughs and says it's hard to Skype with 2 toddlers. Now, that motion to move to Miami was filed January 14th, 2013. In the motion, Wendy said Dan was making things difficult for her at work. Well, that motion was denied, and the judge said Wendy could not ask again. Wendy testified she was relieved to stay in Tallahassee. She was happy at her job. She was working at the FSU Center for Human Rights. She represented victims of violent crimes, victims of human trafficking, and asylum seekers. She also taught various classes at the law school and ran the medical legal partnership. She said she did that for 7 years. Now, at Charlie's trial, she looks through the filing to move to Miami. And when asked if she filed the motion with the intent to not be successful, Wendy smiles and said she thought there was a small chance I would be successful, but not very likely. She said when her and Dan talked about the relocation, Dan thought if he could live nearby and commute to FSU, that might work. She said Dan wanted to leave FSU at some point. Now, in that filing for relocation, Wendy says she is stuck in Tallahassee until Dan decides the time is right for him to leave. Prosecutor Kappelman points out in the filing, you say you want to move to provide a better quality of life for the children by increasing their access to close family and providing more consistency and stability. When asked, who's the close family? Wendy says, my mom, my dad, and my brother. She points out, my brother is here today. His name is Charlie. At his trial, she says that Donna and Harvey live anywhere between 15 minutes to an hour from her at that time, depending on traffic. Dan said in the response to the filing for relocation that Donna and Harvey are bankrolling Wendy's litigation. Back to Charlie's trial, when asked what kind of relationship she has to this day with her parents, she says it's good. Wendy says the relationship Donna has with the boys is very loving, and she's a very dedicated grandmother. Right after Dan's death and they moved back, Wendy and the boys lived with Harvey and Donna. When asked if her divorce was nasty, she said, I think most divorces aren't pleasant. The state points out at one point you guys argued over a tennis racket. Then, when asked if Dan threatened to file kidnapping charges against Wendy, Wendy did not remember that. At Charlie's trial, she admits for the first time this was a contentious divorce. She said Dan tried to get her law license revoked, and they had mediation leading up to settlement. The state asked if there were 2 8-hour mediations with no result. Wendy doesn't remember how long they were, but says they did reach a settlement on the eve of trial. When asked about a motion filed by Dan on March 26, 2014, saying that Donna was disparaging him in front of the kids, Dan points to 3 separate occasions, including one where his son told him, "Grandma says you're stupid." When Dan asked the child, why would she say that? The child said, she says you are trying to take her sunshines from her. This led to Dan filing a motion that asked that Donna only have supervised visits with the boys. He said Donna was a source of parental alienation efforts and says Wendy allowed Donna to watch their sons without asking him first. Now, that motion was supposed to have been heard in May of 2014, but Wendy lost her attorney due to a conflict of interest, and that hearing was postponed. It was never heard before Dan was murdered. I fully believe this is maybe what kickstarted the plan in place to have Dan killed. So June 20th, that motion to relocate was denied. The next email from Donna was on June 27th, 2013. Donna says, we felt you had reasonable thoughts as to what the judge might say or do or think regarding the charade we hoped you would participate in. She says, who would have thought after paying an attorney $600 an hour for 10 months? She says I believe here Donna's talking about the judge, would take an hour and a half of testimony and not even bother calling Dan to the stand and decide that family support for very young children evidently means nothing. Donna mentions financial hardships Wendy will face. Wendy won't be able to save for the boys' futures, paying for sports, eating in restaurants. All that will be a financial burden. She says, as a graduate of FSU Law School and a native of Tallahassee, this judge sees nothing wrong with living there. And Wendy, as a native of South Florida, knows better. She said it's obvious Wendy and her attorney have not figured out this judge because they were shocked at the judge's rapid decision based on nothing that was presented as far as the relocation. Donna asked Wendy how she can figure out what the judge would say about introducing Christianity into the boys' lives. Donna mentions people go to prison all the time and change religions. She said Jesus was a Jew. He gives people hope, and best of all, you get to go to heaven in the end. Sounds good to me. Donna says it'll sound good to the judge. She said there were multiple donations on the judge's contributions website from her church pastors and ministers. Then Donna says, she's a Southern Black lady. How do you know this won't be music to her ears? Shame on you, Donna. Donna has another section to the emails. It's some possible options on Judge Hobbs' decision regarding the Jewish holidays with the boys. Donna says Dan is entitled to half the holidays and alternating yearly with you. You may be interested in the teachings of Jesus because Dan has ruined being Jewish for you in the extreme way he practices it. If the judge questions how much of the Jewish holidays you can have, you explain your parents and brother are Jewish and will be coming to Tallahassee to spend those holidays you're entitled to with the boys. Secondly, if by some crazy stance the judge says, okay, Dan, you can have all the Jewish holidays, then if our bribe doesn't work, you tell him during the year you'll take the kids out of Sunday school and church and cancel their upcoming baptism if he shares those dates with you. If not, keep them there. Third, since it's a separation of church and state, she'll just go by whatever schedule you're given and tell you to work it out yourselves. Who declares what are legitimate holidays and which aren't? The judge isn't out to help you. It's clear since her last ruling, she could care less about anything you had to say on your behalf. You need to help yourself. She goes on to say that most of the wars that have been fought for the last couple of thousand years have been over religion. Charlie brought up a good point when he said Americans were dropped behind enemy lines in World War II wearing Nazi uniforms to get what they wanted. They had a job to get done and a very short time frame to accomplish. You have a job to get done and a very short time frame to accomplish it. If you dressed your kids up in Hitler Youth uniforms and brought them down here, I could care less if it was an act of defiance and would show Dan he's not in control. If your kids are baptized, it doesn't make them Christians. The boys aren't really pirates because they dress up like Jake the Pirate. It's an act. She says Wendy got into this mess by Dan by being so compliant and non-confrontational. If you keep paying your attorney $600 per hour and don't fight for what you want, you're no better off than if you had stayed married to him. He wants sole control of the boys' religious lives, so why let him? Why not stand up to this effer? We're not talking a lifetime of this. She says Wendy has the boys a limited number of days before the mediation, and this is all part of an act. So what I gather here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but seems like Wendy wasn't willing to go along with this. I'm going to convert the boys to Catholicism. And Donna's trying to get her to reconsider because Donna says to please rethink this. We're all willing to help you accomplish this. And that's all it is, Wendy, an act of defiance that'll put a scare into this jackass. It'll infuriate him, and it won't infuriate a judge that you found Jesus. She can't comment on your religious views. She put in all caps, you need to see the big picture. You need to look into a future without your family nearby. Teaching in Tallahassee. Dan, always nearby. It's not a pretty picture. She goes on to list all the things that she thinks Dan's done wrong and asks Wendy, why can't you do this for the next few days that you'll have the boys prior to mediation? You know him. You know which buttons to push. Take something from him. We need to take something from him in order for him to negotiate back. She says Dan is brainwashing the boys religiously, and religion is brainwashing, controlling the masses. There's no doubt you'll have a couple of Orthodox young men on your hands with the only religious influences on them being Dan. He's already got them thinking people who eat shrimp are bad, hot dogs are disgusting, lobster is gross. Wait, the oldest is not even 4 years old yet. Wait till he's 8. She talks about the Jewish activities Dan has the boys doing and says, we don't want you to be the outsider who doesn't join what the rest of the family is doing. Donna says they've talked to 2 separate attorneys who are excellent negotiators. One, they'll likely hire to be the financial attorney when they offer Dan the $1 million to allow his sons to relocate. And they're getting the same advice from both. You must take something from Dan that he wants. Pretend you want the house, the car, the kids in Catholic school, even if you don't. It's the business of clever negotiation. If you can't take anything from him, then what we do is just the financial offer. It's just not as good. And look at it this way. What's the downside? Worst case is the judge gives him the Jewish holidays. Then you offer him taking the kids out of Catholic school if he shares the holidays, or have a stipulation the holidays need to be reviewed yearly. She tells Wendy, you're not a manipulator. Dan is, and you just need to play a role. You're jockeying for position. And in the end, if you do this and it doesn't get the results we're all hoping for, then you can't blame yourself. I'm not saying we're not going to continue to hire an attorney to negotiate and make a financial offer. I don't think you realize the type of offer we're considering. We're planning on you, Charlie, Dad, and I going as high as equal parts in $1 million, offering $333,000 from each of us. But you have to show you're doing your part in this too. We're a team. We can't do this without your help. One of the possibilities in lieu of that much money, obviously we start much lower, is offering not just to take them out of church, but negotiating a settlement which could possibly offer both boys private education at a Hebrew school in Boca. It may include monthly airline tickets to South Florida as long as he lives in Tallahassee. He may stop and think if he could get a job in a city he'd prefer to live in, it would be an easy flight to see his children. He loves living in South Florida. Teaching at his current schedule and with a big chunk of money, he could live down here. And for the 26 weeks per year he teaches, he could fly 2 days a week to Tallahassee. He would have frequent and liberal visitation. You're not looking to remove him from their lives. Well, Donna, we know you are. He needs to understand that. She said he would see them in Miami a significant amount of time, and his child support would be much less also. The attorney who would be laying it out on the line for him, what the various payment offers would be worth to him in 15 to 18 years when he may want to retire, the amount is huge. This payoff can put him at that point without any additional income of his own in the $4 million range. Certain nothing he will ever save in 10 lifetimes. She says Wendy won't be any worse off than if she does nothing, so what's stopping you from just trying? I don't know how much of the big picture you're seeing, honey. She says what she can provide for the boy's life and her own depends on this change. She tells Wendy she'll have a better chance to meet divorced mothers like herself, and she wouldn't need to marry someone to help support her 2 children. You could have a housekeeper, a nanny to help care for the children, and the ability to travel with the boys. She said, I wouldn't imagine you would want to live paycheck to paycheck. Teenagers eat more than the yogurt these boys eat now. Well, I'm going to say right here, I just agree with Donna on that last sentence wholeheartedly. I'm just ready to buy a cow at this point. Donna goes on to say, everyone has a price. You said this divorce isn't about winning and losing, and it's not a competition. You've already lost relocation according to the legal system. Well, it is about winning and losing. We're trying to get a win. You deserve so much more than a life without family, teaching in Tallahassee. Life is tough. And if you don't stand up and take a chance, you don't stand a chance. Please, Wendy, do your part and stand up to him. Make an effort to do this, that our group offer will stand a better chance at being accepted. Don't let this temporary move to Tallahassee ruin your entire life. We all want the same thing, a better emotional and financial life for you and for the boys all the way around. She talks about Wendy's grandmother and says that her grandmother would say to her, fight with every bone in your body for yourself, your boys, and the best possible life you can have. Donna says they'll be there to help her. Just don't tell us. What you need to do now is, quote, move forward with a sense of peace, end quote. That's giving up. I don't believe that's what you want to do after all we've been through together when you're literally a few weeks away from this being over. She ends it, written with love and hope, Mom and Dad. So you see there, more than just I informed Mom this didn't go through. Donna literally telling her how to torture a man who only wanted to be with his boys. It's crazy. Another email, February 18th, 2014. So some time has passed between these two. This is also 2 months before Dan would be shot and killed. Donna tells Wendy her attorney must make Dan, who in this email she calls Elvis, have a deposition to see if any of the retirement accounts has ever had a check written from them and were funded through any joint assets. And if so, you would be entitled to a portion. Donna also says it's important to get the parenting coordinator to either testify or give a deposition so we can get her to request Dan be court ordered for psychological testing. And if he's off, he should not be permitted to take the kids out of the country. If you remember, Dan is from Canada. His parents lived there, his sister lived there. So I'm sure on some of his times he was taking the boys up there. So I wanted to revisit those emails because I do think they're going to come in this trial. It really establishes that desperation Donna had at getting those boys down to Miami and how she was just nonstop in these emails, coming up with really vile ways to try to get Dan to bend. After so long, you forget these little things in these cases. And when we start that trial, I want us to be on top of it. I'm interested to see what new evidence they have against Donna. This week may be a little off and on. My daughter's moving to New Orleans Saturday. Y'all send me Valium. I'm not handling this well. It's breaking my heart, but it's kind of the circle of life. I'm just not ready. So if she needs help or I'm doing things with her, I may go a day or two off. But from here on, what I plan to do is take all these trials and I'm watching all three, stopping them sort of when we hit certain points and making notes of what was said at this trial, that trial, and then noting any discrepancies. And it's just a refresher of what to expect to be testified to in just a couple of weeks when Donna is in that defendant seat. All right, guys, hope you have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.